Welcome everybody to this Myth of Black Buying Power Redux. QR code above me to get a copy of the book. Links in the show description to the chapter by chapter full breakdown and a full playlist of all the videos and all the lectures and all the discussion about the book and related work. As I still try to endeavor to make the argument succinct and plain and respond to constructive criticism, I wanted to try to put together this Redux. So again, we're going to be overly simplistic, overly summative. So please do check the work for all the details and further arguments and related arguments around what we're going to cover here in this relatively quick, again, Redux session. So what is buying power? One, it is an attempt to manage the contradiction between profit and labor. That is, in its origins, to find exactly how much to pay people so that they can shop and consume the products they help to produce and keep the economy going, but not be paid enough that they don't need the job, and not be paid so little that they rebel. Secondly, buying power is an attempt to measure the ability of any particular consumer group to enrich the owners of the economy. And three, buying power is an attempt to determine advertising revenue expenditures for business. What buying power is not. Buying power is not a measurement of income. Buying power is not a measurement of wealth. Buying power is not gross domestic product or GDP. And buying power is not a pool of existing money that can be used as any community would want. The early history of the concept, before even it becomes a myth, particularly targeted and weaponized against Black people, the concept of buying power emerges around the turn of the 20th century, 1895 to 1905, as a subset of cost of living surveys that were again designed to manage labor. Pay enough that they can shop, not too much that they don't need the job, not too little that they rebel. The myth evolves. From 1905 to 1945, roughly, the Black business community championed the claims of shifting consumption from white to Black businesses. This is where the foundations, the beginnings of taking the original purpose of buying power and having it be grafted on to Black business claims about the value of Black people buying from Black businesses. The myth concretizes. From roughly 1945 to 1970, the national big myth of market fundamentalism is grafted on to the rise and the emergence of the so-called Negro market. So the white corporate world created the big myth that capitalism and markets and business and so-called free market fundamentalism or free market capitalism would solve all the problems facing everyone. And this got attached to an evolving consumer base within the Black community that was having its own businesses, its own Black-owned businesses themselves claim the big myth of market fundamentalism within the Black context. Again, if you shop Black, the Black business community will end up benefiting the entire Black community. And that this process, this Black capitalist consumer market fundamentalist approach would solve all the problems facing the community. The myth is weaponized. From 1970 to 1992, as a subsidiary of the larger narrative of Black capitalism, buying power is targeted against Black liberation and the suppression of nationalism, pan-africanism, and socialism. This is when the Nixon administration, as a specific response to the rise of Black power, redefines the concept of Black power as one strictly wedded to the narrative and concepts of Black capitalism, specifically to suppress the radical tendencies within the community to develop new ways of evolving society and achieving liberation. How the myth circulates from 1992 to the present. The Selig Center, whose goal is the development of Georgia's business community, mass distributes the myth, begins in the early 1990s to mass distribute the myth, to be later joined by Nielsen, the Black Press, and most recently, McKinsey and Company, all following the same flawed logic, the same flawed methodology, all to make falsely interpreted claims about what buying power is or is not and its ability to solve the problems facing the Black community. It's also in this time period where even Black radical scholars picked up the myth in new ways, referencing the Selig Center, and helped, even inadvertently, circulate the myth in very powerful ways. How the myth survives today? Today, a militarized and commercial media environment recycles uncritically the self-serving claim and largely works to sever Black people from labor. The more Black people are convinced that buying power, circulating dollars, supporting Black businesses and Black banks, etc., can solve the problems of the material conditions imposed on Black people, the more difficult it becomes to organize the radical movements for real change that need to occur, and specifically pulls Black people out of what should be their rightful place in a broader labor movement, since that's where most Black people will end up. Most people of all backgrounds will end up as laborers. And instead of working to unionize, collectively bargain, create other forms of redistributive movements and claims, Black people are encouraged back into a mythology around capitalist market fundamentalism, albeit with Black business and other forms of leadership. But that is not a solution that will solve these problems, and is part of the reason the myth has been intentionally evolved and imposed and distributed and targeted against Black communities. Again, I hope this Redux helps. Please do check the work for all the details and more, all the other presentations, videos. Of course, the book itself is available. And as always, as Fred Hampton used to say, peace, only if you're willing to fight for it. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.